Our first performer tonight is Mark Adams in Finding the Real Me. America is a country of immigrants, but you never know it. With snapshots from his life, Mark traces his discovery of his family's escape from the Holocaust and his children's struggles with their identity. Please welcome Mark Adams.
Hi, I'm Mark Adams. I like that name. It's simple, it's easy to pronounce. My mother's from Boston, some blue-blooded family. So when I was a little kid, people used to always come up to me and say, "Are you related to John Quincy Adams?" I wanted to say yes, but Adams is my father's family name, and they're from Saginaw. They're not related to anybody famous. Philadelphia, 1970. Riding the school bus home. I'm maybe 8 years old. It's a beautiful spring day. My friends and I clamber off the school bus and we're walking down the street. I live on Ivywood Lane, an idyllic 1960s suburbs, meandering street through the woods. We even had a cul-de-sac where we played wiffle ball. We're walking along and laughing, and then up ahead, I see something strange. It's two old people walking very slowly, leaning on each other. And their clothes are odd, like they're from a different era. The woman's wearing heavy brown shoes, thick stockings, and a wool skirt, way too warm for a spring day in Philadelphia. And the man is small with white hair and sharp features, and he's wearing a tie and a formal jacket. And I look at them, and it's my grandparents from Saginaw. Mana, Pata, you're here. My grandfather, a little bit stunned. My, Mark, you've grown. Margot, look at how big our grandson is. I look at them and I don't know what to say. They're just so foreign. I'm supposed to love them, but I don't know how to actually talk to them. The whole week they're there, we sort of make polite talk, but I never get beneath the veneer to understand who they really are or the lives that they've lived. Month later, it's summertime. All the kids are out in the baseball, the wiffle ball court, whacking the ball and running around the bases. We're having a great time. My dad's walking the dog and he looks over and goes, "Hey, can I give it a shot?" I've never seen my dad play baseball. My dad's a professor. We don't play catch. We don't do things like that. "Sure, Dad, batter up." My dad comes up and looks at the bat and steps up to the plate, and like, "Back up, Dad, you're a little bit too close to the plate." And my friend Michael's pitching and he throws a sneaky slider. My dad swings. He's like not even close to the ball. So we all kind of nod at each other and look at Michael, and Michael gets it. So my dad comes back up and he gets up and Michael throws an easy floater. Dad swings. And like, you don't strike out at wiffle ball. Dear God, let my dad hit the ball. So he gets ready for the third pitch. Michael winds up a nice easy floater and it swings. God damn it, this is too hard. I felt bad with him. He just wanted to play with his kids, but he didn't know how. Philadelphia, 1978. I'm 15 years old, coming home from school. My mother's a warm, generous woman who has a naive belief in the goodness of the world. "Mom, I'm home." "Mark, can you come down here for a minute?" "Sure, Mom. What's up?" "I need to talk to you about something." What's going on? "I think it's important that we not keep secrets in this family." Oh, shit. Did I leave my pipe in my pocket? "Mark, I don't know how to explain this, but Adams is our family name. But when your father was born, Adams wasn't his name." "What do you mean?" when your father was born, the family name was Weissenberg. Weissenberg? Why am I just learning about this now? Honey, I just learned about it. Your father's really sensitive about this. Weissenberg, is that Jewish? Yes, but your father was never raised Jewish. His family escaped from Germany just before the war. That's why they came to America. Wow, I had no idea. Huh. Is it okay if I go play with Michael now? Sure, go ahead. Just be careful with this information, okay? This is sensitive. Sure, Mom, don't worry, I've got it. So I thought about it for about 5 minutes. I've got a bunch of friends who are Jewish, and they're good guys. I didn't have any problem being Jewish, and in a funny way, I thought it was kind of cool. So later that night, we're getting ready for dinner. I think we were having the usual, the overcooked meatloaf, the soggy frozen vegetables, and the mashed potatoes from a box. Hey, what can I say? It was the 70s. My father rushes in late as usual. And says, sorry, I'm late. Traffic was terrible. Hey, Dad, I hear the family name is Weissenberg and that we're Jewish. Who the hell told you that? Mom did. That's a secret and stays a secret. Understood? Yeah, Dad, I got it. What landmine had I stepped on? Philadelphia, 1987. I'm home visiting from school when my mother hands me a blue ring binder. What's this? It's your grandfather Walter's life story. He wrote down everything that happened to them when they escaped from Germany. I thought you should have a copy. Wow, Mom, thank you. This is really cool. I need to read this. I put it on the shelf and didn't open it for 35 years. Jakarta, Indonesia, 1995. I'm living with my girlfriend, Mara Lee, who's Chinese American. Ari's our driver and window on how Indonesians think. Ari's driving me through the endless Jakarta traffic when he looks in the rearview mirror. Mr. Mark, I have a question. Sure, Ari, what is it? Mr. Mark, Miss Mara Lee, she American? Yeah, Ari, we're both American. Mr. Mark, you American. Miss Mara Lee, she Chinese. Ari, she's just as American as I am. No. Miss Mara Lee, she Chinese. Why? Was my Indonesian driver challenging the nationality of my girlfriend? It's just like, what the hell? And then it hit me. There are millions of Chinese in Indonesia, but it doesn't matter how long you've lived there. You'll always be Chinese, the other. Ari's questions were almost a prophecy. 2 years later, there were anti-Chinese riots all over Jakarta. Marilee and I rushed to the airport because an American passport is meaningless to an angry mob. Boston, 1998. My father's marrying Heidi. My mother passed away 2 years earlier. Her dying wish was that my father would remarry. Just like my mother, Heidi is a professor and from Boston. But rather than a blue-blooded wasp, Heidi is Jewish and committed to her faith. So my father gets married in a classic Jewish wedding. Under the chuppah, he's wearing a yarmulke, and when he steps on the glass, we all scream, Mazel tov! Joke's on you, Dad. Cupertino, 2009. 57%. 23andMe send me the results, and I'm 57% Ashkenazi Jew. The 50% I get, that's from my dad's side. But the 7%? My mother was a blue blood family from Boston. Where did the 7% come from? And what's 57% Ashkenazi Jew mean? I wasn't raised Jewish. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, they don't mean anything to me. Right after the October 7th events, a friend of mine sent me a text and he said, Mark, all this shit going down in Israel, my heart goes out to you and your people. My people? I feel terrible about what's happening in Israel and Gaza. But are these my people? Cupertino, 2016. Hiking in the hills with my daughter Danielle, who's a freshman in college. She's a beautiful mixed race young girl. Almond eyes, blonde streaks in her hair, but she's shy. You have to coax things out of her. So honey, how are things going in school? Yeah, it's okay. Why just okay? Boston's really white. White? What's that mean? Everybody in Boston's white, and they want me to fit into their boxes. But honey, you're white. Dad, I'm half white and half Chinese. I like being Chinese. I don't want to have to give that up. I'm stunned. I just assumed my kids would think of themselves as white. I never realized they'd identify as Chinese or mixed race. But what is white anyway? I mean, in the 1950s, it was WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, Irish, Italian, Jewish. You weren't white. But over time, as everybody moved to the suburbs and communities integrated, also the tent that's white expanded, as long as you're not a person of color. Cupertino, 2019. I'm retired. The kids have moved out of the house. What am I going to do with all this time? I start going through some old boxes. And then I find this blue ring binder from all those years ago. My grandfather's Walter's life story. Am I going to figure out who I finally am? I start reading. It's wordy, dense, rambling. But I see that little old man from so many years before. My grandfather is now a young man and proud and defiant as he's explaining the twists and turns in his life that made him flee Germany and come to America. Breslau, 1920. Germany's just lost the war. Walter's father, Moritz Weissenberg, runs the finest dress shop in all of Breslau, but he just died. So Walter's responsible for his mother, his two sisters, and the dress shop. After the war, I returned home and took stock of my life. I was 24 and the man of the house. Germany was in disarray. There were no jobs. The store had no customers. I needed to make some decisions to set my life in the correct direction. I decided to renounce Judaism. It was simple. I made the appointment with the judge. I went and changed my affiliation from Jewish to dissident. Done. But my mother was aghast. How could I leave Judaism? She did not understand. I had to make a choice. I could no longer be both German and Jewish. Walter married Margaret Adam. That's where Adams comes from. And 6 months before the crash of 29, they had twin boys. The boys, maybe 5 weeks old. Jerry looks at me and he smiles the boyish grin. My son recognizes me. I am responsible for them. My life has been hard. I've had many humiliations, but throughout, I have always had a confidence in the future. My God, my Christian God stands next to me. Margaret and I join St. John's Church, and we have the boys baptized. Baptism. I never understood the significance of that till just last year. I was talking with Heidi, and she told me the story of when she was first with my father. Mark, you wouldn't believe it. The first time I was with your father. Oh my God, it was disgusting. I had never seen one like that. Your father, he wasn't circumcised. Breslau, 1931. Germany is collapsing. The economy in free fall. The store bankrupt. My mother blames me. What could I do? No one had money. For 2 years, I look. Finally, I find a good job in the labor department. I do good work, and my peers respect me. They come to me and they say, Walter, you should join the National Socialist Party. My parents are Jews. I go, don't worry. the anti-Semitism, it's just propaganda. A month later, the Nazi district leader come to my home and invite me to join the Nazis. I say, it's not possible. So he writes to Nazi headquarters to get guidance. 2 weeks later, the answer come in a letter. What counts is the blood only. In that moment, I have no illusion who the Nazis are and what it means for me. 2 years later, the politics are a wreck. There's the Reichstag fire and Hitler takes power. My grandfather Walter loses his job 2 weeks later. How dare they reject me? I am a good German. I need to be a free man. My sons must live as free men. We could not leave fast enough. We sold everything, and within 6 months, we moved to Rome. My one regret, I tried, but my mother Amanda would not come with us. Breslau was a home, and she was the old woman. Why would the Nazis bother her? Cupertino, 2019. I'm surfing the internet when I stumble across a Holocaust database. For fun, I type in my grandmother's name, Amanda Roth Weissenberg. Within 2 seconds, the answer comes back. Born April 1872, Breslau. Transported to Treblinka, May 1942. Presumed dead. If you die in a concentration camp, there's no marker, there's no memorial, there's no service. It's as if you don't exist. You're gone to oblivion. Wrocław, Poland, 2019. Breslau doesn't exist anymore. It's been renamed Wrocław. Danny and I clamber off the tram. We're making our way to the Jewish cemetery. The gate's rusted. We push it open. The place is destroyed in ruins, but in the distance I see a shed. I go, I knock on the door. A kind Polish caretaker answers. Hi, do you speak English? A little. I type into Google Translate. We're looking for my great-grandfather, Moritz Weissenberg's tomb. Do you know where it is? The war. No records. No. I look at Danny. What are we going to do? We came all this way to find Moritz's tomb. I just assumed they would have some sort of map or something. I'm like, shit. And then I remember I have a photo from 1967 of Moritz's tomb. I look it up on my phone and I show it to the caretaker. The caretaker looks and he goes, "You follow me." We take off in a sprint through the cemetery, and the place is destroyed. The crypts have been broken open, the tomb's knocked over, there's beer cans everywhere, bullet holes, but we're running and he's pointing and he's looking. And then he slows down and he looks at the picture again. You find. So Danny and I start wandering the cemetery. We find the memorial for the Jewish boys who fought for Germany in World War I. We find the crematorium where they tortured the Jews in World War II. Breslau had over 1 million Jews at the beginning of the war. By the end of the war, there were none. In the distance, we see a tomb. As we get closer, it looks right. There's no marking, it's totally defaced. But if you look really closely, you can just see the shadow of my grandfather's name, my great-grandfather's name, Moritz Weissenberg. We found it. So Danny runs and gets the caretaker, and he's very happy. He makes us write down Moritz's birthday and day of death and all his family members. And then he says, "Thank you. During the war, we lost everything. The least we can do is reclaim the dead."
Mark Adams, everybody. Okay, our second, and as it turns out, final performer this evening is Abby Glover in, well, let's just say it's a still unnamed work in progress, all right? But it's a piece about us as, well, let me start here. In a society that rewards striving and achieving, an insecure perfectionist doesn't know when to stop. Abby wants more money, more power, more security, more prestige, more. But what happens when the things you think will set you free trap you instead? Please welcome Abby Glover.
I've been unstaffed for the past 2 days after wrapping up my longest case ever. 4 whole weeks. Being unstaffed or on the beach is the best. You literally get paid to do nothing. You don't even have to go to the office. And this is pre-pandemic days. I go to the office today because Fridays rule. We get free catered lunch, and unlike a lot of our peers, our company prides itself on having no work weekends. So Fridays really do feel like the start of something special. It's 4 p.m. and I'm getting ready to go home, just doing some final palling around with the associates. I'm a consultant, which means I'm no more qualified than these 22-year-olds who actually went to better schools than I did and have been doing this job longer than I have, but I'm supposed to be managing them. Well, because I'm 30 and I have my master's of business administration. And they would resent me, but I'm not a regular consultant. Nah, I'm a cool consultant. Yeah, because I treat them like equals. And then I get an email. Hi, Abby. Can you please confirm your availability for a 2-week due diligence on skilled nursing facilities at your earliest convenience? Thanks. Betsy, Senior Staffing Manager.
Yeah.
10 years ago, between my sophomore and junior years of college, I went to business camp. Well, because I'm a history major, so I have to learn some real useful skills for the job market. And that's where I first learned about management consulting. And I've wanted to be a management consultant ever since. At business camp, they say management consulting is a job for people with job ADD. Well, because you jump from project to project, team to team, industry to industry, solving all sorts of different kinds of problems, and you travel. Yeah, management consultants always have airline status. And the way everyone talks about it, management consulting, I can tell. Only the smartest people who went to the best schools get to become management consultants. Or, well, maybe they know the right people, but regardless, I can tell it's a job people aspire to, which means there's got to be a lot of money in it. And I like the sound of that. I never want to worry about money. So I worked really hard my last 2 years of college to get those interviews for full-time management consulting jobs. And that's when I come face to face with the case interview. Yeah, could I get you to estimate the GDP of the world from the beginning of time? Like I said, I'm a history major, so I start to short circuit. Because, like, when does time begin? And are we including the bartering economy? How am I going to quantify the bartering economy? Well, I guess I'd take the GDP of the world today, do something about inflation, and then regress it backwards. So whenever time began. Can you expand on that? No. So I don't get the job in management consulting right out of college, but I do get a job in consulting. There isn't a case interview for this one, just behavioral. What would you say is your greatest weakness? I got this. I'm a perfectionist, which means I'm always trying to get everything right. But it's also a strength because it means I always do my absolute best, no matter how many of my own boundaries it violates. It turns out consulting has kind of a broad definition. It's kind of like cheese, you know, one broad category, lots of different types. Like if management consulting is brie, something rich, sophisticated, expensive, what I'm doing is more like a big block of reliable, unassuming, Whole Foods 365 brand mild cheddar. Digital transformation, risk management, compliance. Over 2 years, my projects get less varied and longer, less varied in subject matter and longer in length. But I have job EDD. I want to scream. I need a change. And when I'm not granted one fast enough, well, I quit. In my exit interviews, a partner tells me, you know, Abby, the grass isn't always greener. And he isn't wrong. At 24, I become a job hopper, changing jobs every 1 to 2 years, always moving laterally, never up, always making $65,000 a year. And they always say, know your worth. So I try to negotiate. Yeah, I do my research on market comps and inflation, and I present the number. I won't settle for anything less than $70,000. Well, it's 65. Okay. Where do I sign? But by the time I'm 27, well, I'm sick of it. I want to prove to everyone that I'm worth more than $65,000. Business school. It'll require $150,000 worth of student loans. Oh, but boy, with that Master's of Business Administration, an MBA, I'll be unstoppable. Money, credibility, respect. And on day one, there's an info session with free food for management consulting interviews. Oh, the type of consulting I've always dreamed of. A real consultant, the creme de la creme, the cream of the crop, the brie of consultants. Oh, 3 main firms, not companies. No, they're more than that. McKinsey, Bain, BCG. I don't get a job at any of those when I graduate, but I do get one at a 2nd-tier spot. And we're actually an offshoot of one of the big 3, so we like to think that gives us a little more clout in the market. And we actually have the highest starting base salary of them all, $170,000. But it turns out I'm still not really doing management consulting, because I'm mostly doing private equity due diligences, which is basically just like market research for hyper demanding clients. And specifically, I'm mostly doing these 2-week sprints where a private equity firm will come to us and be like, hey, we want to make this investment and we really needed the market assessment yesterday. So we know this is an insanely tight timeline for the amount of work required, but hey, time is money. Am I right? And then the partners at our firm are like, sure, we can do it. And by we can do it, they mean Abby and the associates can do it. And Abby does it. Yeah, she stays up all night coding surveys, and she calls Bobby G, who's stacking shelves at the Best Buy in Iowa City, because he's the expert who's got to let her know what he's stacking and where for the Kindle industry market size. And she Control-Alt-Shift-L left aligns all the text boxes on the slide. And thankfully, she has her associate friends who help her with Excel, because she doesn't know how to build a robust model. There's no time to learn. And I can't quit. No, I can't quit because my student loans, yeah, that live on my back, sucking my blood like an engorged leech. Oh, and I can't quit. I can't quit because they own me. Yeah, because my starting bonus, $30,000, which they gave me a year ago, which I've since spent on said student loans, requires 2 years of unquestioned servitude, shackling me to this job until they decide that I've put in enough work and earned back their generous advance and my freedom. And I can do the job, I can do the job, and I can do the job really well. And I know that because we compared our salaries and bonuses across my class of consultants, and I know I'm a top performer. And I also know that's why I keep getting burned. Yeah, because I'm a perfectionist and I'm insecure. So I stay up all night just to get that damn slide right. But when I told them, I raised my hand a couple of times because I told them, I can't do this anymore, I'm on the edge. This is too much job ADD, I am breaking, I need a break. It's 4 p.m. on a Friday. I've officially been a consultant for 1 year, and I've just wrapped up my longest case ever. 4 whole weeks. I finally feel like I can breathe. I can do this. Hi, Abby. Can you please confirm your availability for a 2-week due diligence on skilled nursing facilities at your earliest convenience? Thanks. Betsy, Senior Staffing Manager. What? Oh, no. The 17-hour days, the sleepless nights, no time for family, friends, working out, eating anything other than takeout food delivered to the office every day and night, morphing into an unshowered, bloodshot eyeball of nerves on the brink of collapse. No! Hi, Betsy. No. I cannot confirm my availability at this time. Betsy leaves her office, walks towards me. What do you mean you can't confirm your availability at this time? Well, I won't be here next week. How do you know? We didn't approve vacation for you next week. Well, Betsy, you're gonna have to take that up with my therapist. And due to the few laws out there that protect employees from employers, she can't. And I take my short-term disability leave and I start to plot my way out. That's the end.
Take another call, come on.
Okay, so we'll be a very brief pause before we get a couple of chairs and or stools on stage while we have one. And that's what.
These are the days we've been waiting never forget.
So when you were, how did you decide to do it the way that you did, where you were going through and saying this point in time, and then you would tell kind of what happened and the ability to kind of go back and forth? Like, how did that thought pattern?
So it was funny, this project came out of, I was writing a screenplay and I was basically taking my grandfather's life story and trying to turn that into a screenplay. And so I gave that up because I'm not a screenwriter, it was way too hard. But out of that, I kind of said, how do I tell this story? And it became much more meaningful to tell it as these series of vignettes that were from my life. And then, but the format is what I call screenplay, and that it's sort of a scene header, which is Philadelphia, 2009.
Okay.
And then a 2-line, here's the situation. I'm a little boy riding the bus home from school, or I'm coming home from school, and a short description of the character of my mother, and then dive right in. And so for me, that was just a really good way to sort of skip through time and try and give you all the different flavors of the story and watch the story build.
Well, I have a question, unless someone was just about ready to go. Okay, so Evan, this is for you. Although you did another show. I never saw the whole thing, but I saw a number of pieces and versions of it, which was really good and really interesting, sort of more about your romance life, shall we say. So I guess I wondered, how did you know when you were done with that and it was time to move on to another story? Because sometimes people just keep writing and rewriting and changing, and how did you know, nope, it's time to move on to something else?
Well, I set a firm deadline for myself to finish like a really solid draft that in my mind it was like the final, having never really performed before. And so then not realizing that it was a living, breathing thing and that it would continue to evolve past the arbitrary deadline I gave myself. So that being said, that deadline was like August of this past year. So since then, I've really just been kind of making little tweaks to it and kind of honing my performance skills and stage presence rather than rewriting or anything like that. So it's a lot more just like, being more present and, what's the emotion behind the lines, like that sort of stuff. And so then that is now kind of a different muscle that's being worked, whereas this is now generating new material from scratch. So it's keeping me balanced, I would say, in some ways.
Do you prefer one part of the process over the other?
I definitely prefer when it starts to look and feel like a full piece. Like I'm in the mess right now, I'm in the weeds, which some people say is an opportunity because you don't know what's going to happen. But I'm someone that's like, I want to know what the end, what's going to look like. So, yeah. I don't know. Think of my answer. Yeah.
I actually have the same question for both of you, but I guess if you had to think about like what you're hoping to change or add or gain from where the work is now, because this is the first time I'm seeing like this is a whole piece. And so I'm curious, what about it feels like a work in progress, or when do you know when it'll be done for both of you?
Ladies first.
Oh, thank you. Everybody I'm in a little bit of a funky spot because I wrote this to be as something that I knew I wanted to be a longer piece, but for a class in which I had to do like a 10 to 12 minute performance. So I wrote it and then I was attached to the way it is now. And I was like, how am I gonna grow it back? I already cut down so much. So now I'm in the weeds of being like, what's it even about? Is it about my corporate stuff? Is it about a larger story? is that the climax or is that the midpoint, right? Like where, what, so, something else is coming, but I don't know what it is, and I'm probably gonna have to write like all of it in order to figure it out, which is, but that's where I'm at, yeah.
So this is the second time I've done this piece. I did this piece for a class with David Ford. And so for me, this is really fun because I feel like the last time I did it was 4 months ago, and so I'm able to really evolve it. And this is, I'm feeling much more comfortable with it. This is the first of my vision of 3 pieces. This is about my identity sort of as a child and my heritage. My second piece, which I'm struggling through right now, is about the other identity that's important to me, which is fatherhood. And then my third piece is about husband and being married. And so sort of want to, I think, use a similar format, but start to build more flavors or contextual to the other identities that I assume and trapped me. So that's what I'm trying to play with. But exactly as Abby says, it's kind of like I'm in the mire of what's the real point of the second one. This first one was easy for me because I've been working this material and I had a clear idea of where I wanted to go. Second one is much more difficult. And the third one is very intimidating because my wife is not very happy about it.
For both of you, how much of this is a journey in finding your own answers to your own life, finding out who you are, versus the craft, the skill that you're learning in acting and writing and performing? Is the goal to become a better performer, or is the goal to kind of find yourself in this process?
My turn? Okay. I would say 2 things for me. One, I've always been a storyteller. I love storytelling. I've always done it in the corporate format to raise money or do an investment or whatever. And so to actually turn the lens on myself is very different and very vulnerable. And so when I started this process as kind of, you know, I am retired, there's a lot of autobiography, as you guys saw. And so there is, you know, the point where I pick up the book and who am I? And I'm telling that story to myself and you guys at the same time, but it really helps me to go back and look back and kind of go, wow, that's who I was then, and this is who I am now. And so that's an important process and incredible therapy, best therapy I've ever done.
I would say that my work is grounded in, and this is probably like exactly what it says on my website, because I just always say it, is that it's grounded in a desire to say the things that I have thought and felt, but have been too scared, ashamed, afraid to say out loud for fear of judgment, shame, rejection, all those things. So I've spent my whole life being bottled up, just like a can of Coke, until I was about 32. I'm 35 now, so it's still new. But everything that I am working on now is like the stuff that like I've been carrying around for all these years, you know, with the underlying question of asking, you know, myself, like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I say these things? Why do I feel ashamed of these things? How come no one else is saying these things? But then you do say something, and then I was always afraid to say anything to anyone, but I'm saying now, you know, I'll say something and other people will be like, I felt the same way. And I'm like, oh, I wish I'd known. My life would have been so different if I had known that I could share these things, right? So I think for me, my main, you know, it is obviously therapeutic for me. But it is also, if there's anyone out there that is even remotely like me or ever feels that way, like I want to be someone that they feel like they can be like, oh, you know. And so to your question about like the technical component of it, that is really for me just in service of like it being a better communicator and getting the point across in a more effective way. Because I've noticed I didn't have any acting training or anything, and there's a huge difference between like my early stuff and then what it looks like after doing like the show that Arnie was mentioning I've done probably 40 times now. And it's just like, it's night and day, and people get, all the little nuggets I was trying to dribble, but I couldn't, whatever. As that technique has gotten better, I would say.
So you partly answered my follow-on question, but it sounds like you were wanting to use this to give yourself a voice, but what you've actually found is by doing this, you've given other people a voice. Because everybody does have the same fears and experiences and are also ashamed to say it. And so you give them the courage then to,
Yeah,
And-
that's
and-
my hope, yeah.
I mean, we know Mark, but Mark's is so touching to me because we're a mixed marriage. And it was hard for me when my son came home and said, Dad, I'm not white.
Right.
Like, what do you mean you're not white? You're half white. No, Dad. They rounded up to the darker color, you're not white, so, so that's touching to me from what you said with Dan, but in what you're doing, you're definitely giving other people the voice, both of you are, which is beautiful.
That's why storytelling is so important, and that's the other thing is like, people see my show, they see us perform, and they think I can do it, right? It's like, everyone can do it. It's like I, for so long, thought I didn't have a story. I thought I had this one story, which is how one time I got really drunk in college, and I like asked Hugh Grant if I could make out with him. Because he was at the party. And that was like one story, and it was like a party trick, and that was it. And I had nothing else in my whole life to
What did
even,
you say?
yeah.
Okay.
So, but you know what I mean? And it's like, I think we're both testaments to the fact that like, you can make a story out of anything. And everyone's life is valid and worthy and rich with material and like, yeah. So if it gets one more person thinking that their story is worth telling, that's awesome too,
And I'll put in a plug, because I've seen it here. They have a show they do, I want to say Sundays at noon, called The Waiting Room. And it's a story about the waiting period, thank you, but it's a story about suicide, and it's all about this person sort of contemplating suicide and realizing that other people recognize what he's doing, and that there's this whole subtext of community that are thinking those thoughts but don't know how to express them. So it's very similar to what we're saying, voices that are inside of us that society doesn't allow you to always express. So I had a question for you. And this is actually drawing from my class. One of my students had this great trick where he picked up the phone and he called his younger self and he gave advice to his younger self. So if you could call your 20-year-old self, what would your message be?
Well, it's so funny because in therapy last week, we were talking to my 16-year-old self.
You tell me, whoever you want to call, it's your dog.
She's not alone. Yeah, I think I'd tell her, it's all gonna work out as it should. I think, we talked a little bit about this before. Can I tell them?
Oh, of course.
Mark is an ex-McKinsey consultant. And so we were bonding over, this shared path in some ways. And I sometimes regret, sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish I, got off the path sooner and I, started performing sooner and all stuff, but A, I wouldn't be the person I am today. Like B, I wasn't ready for it, like all these things. And so it's like, yeah, but I would like my 20 to 32-year-old self be a little less anxious and like, so I tell her to just chill out. Everything's gonna work out. I'm just so worried. Yeah. What would you tell your 20-year-old Mark?
Oh, gosh. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out what to say to my 40-year-old self.
Let's talk to 40-year-old.
I mean, it all works out, and I actually think part of life is you have these dreams that society paints for ourselves, or our peers do, or whatever. And you swing at the ball, and all of a sudden you walk in those shoes, and you go, "Gosh, these aren't very comfortable shoes, and this isn't who I am." And the only trick is to figure it out, and then go try a different pair of shoes until you find some you like. And then my one advice, being 30 years ahead of you, doesn't stop.
Yeah.
Even when you achieve your dreams, it's still, you gotta keep finding the next thing that you want to chase.
Yep,
That's why I'm here.
that's one. Yep, love that.
Profound.
I'm just
Really,
Curious as to
Other
what the
questions?
heck
Yeah.
was,
what the hat's all about?
Yes.
Well, I take clown classes and I'm working on a clown piece that incorporates this hat. That's two sides of, like, one is someone who wants to like really just do everything right and please everyone, and then there's the one that resents it, and so there's this tension there. And, this is the first time I've worn it while actually doing this piece, and I don't know how it's ever gonna actually be a part of it. But it was fun to just try out and see how it felt. So thanks for being bearing witness to you might be the only ones. So, yeah, just a little experiment.
Oh, that's fun. And the question is, what are you doing now? When you said no and you were done, then what happened?
Yeah, there's like a 5-year, like, slow, to, now, I do this, I guess, full time, as I work at an art collective a couple hours a week. I write, I take classes, and, yeah, I'm just figuring things out, trying to recalibrate. Yeah.
Yes, in the back, sir.
Thank you, Arnie. Thank you, Arnie, for hosting this every Monday night. What is the best thing about doing this, and what is the worst thing for both of you? The best thing about doing this, what's the worst thing about doing this?
Okay, I'll go. I mean, the best thing is tonight. I mean, without an audience, you can't do it. And there's something, put a lot of work into hitting your marks and thinking through how you do it. It just gets better and better. So that's by far the best thing. The other thing I love though, is I'll grab onto a piece of my story when I'm just talking with friends over a beer. And I can access it. It's like I can tell stories in the rest of my life. I don't have to just be on stage. So that's fun too, to have access to that. The worst part is the struggle when you get up on stage and it doesn't go right, or you haven't figured out what you really want to say. And so you feel like you're just flailing, like you're that fish out of water flapping on the stage. That's no fun. But the stupid part is you guys don't bite. It's the worst that could happen, so it's okay, but we all carry shame.
Yeah, I agree with your best part is having an audience and being able to share with other people and just getting on stage and doing this. And the worst part is I hate being in the unknowing, in the mire. So, yeah, it's uncomfortable. It's also uncomfortable. Yeah. That's it.
The host has walked away for a second, but he's still here. He actually has a question. Which is, and to some extent, I think it's been partly answered, but I mean, there's a lot of people who want to tell their story. They write poetry, they write blogs, they write short stories, they make it into fiction, but they don't necessarily get up on a stage in front of people to do it. So I'm going to ask you both why, what calls you to tell your stories in front of a live audience?
There's just nothing like it. It's quite the thrill. I also I love connecting with people. I am okay at it. Also, I'm good at it in small groups, like 1, 2, 3 people. I'm good at it in big groups, and I'm horrible at it in the middle. So I feel freer when I'm on stage than if I'm at a dinner party with 10, 15 people. I don't know how to participate. And so for me, and I feel like I come alive on stage for me and myself. My writing is fine, but I think it translates to something else when it's performed. Yeah.
So for me, I live about a block and a half away. And so I came to a couple of shows at the Marsh, and I was just kind of like, whoa, what a funky format, this sort of solo monologue. And as I said before, I was trying to write a screenplay, And one of the things I realized is when you're working with a concept, you can't just think of it monolithically, like I'm gonna do it kind of like Game of Thrones. You have to play with it and massage it. That's how the themes come alive. So when I started to struggle with the screenplay, I said, okay, hey, the Marsh has this class with David Ford and you can develop your own thing. And I actually did not realize that I was going to have to be characters, that I was going to write, direct, and act in my own screenplay, mini. And I was kind of like, oh crap. I thought this was more like The Moth, where you sort of tell stories, but you don't necessarily become characters. And then as I got comfortable with it, I was like, oh, this is fun. And you can really play a little bit more and I think go emotionally deeper. And so for me, that's been a real experience and a lot of fun.
And I do think you learn so much about your writing when you perform it. Like, I don't know if it's the same for you, but you can feel when things are clunky and they don't belong. It like all just kind of comes together. You're like, oh, wow, that whole scene doesn't matter. Cut it. It's gone. And when you're up there, you're just like, wow, yep, noted. But you could be holding on to it so tight when it's on the page. But when you perform it, you just know, you're like, gone. Doesn't matter.
Well, for me, there's this odd process I go through where I write it and it's almost like a book. And then I start acting it, and I start cutting pieces out. And then I put this piece down for 4 months, picked it up again, and now I'm totally rewriting it, but I'm doing it extemporaneously in front of you guys. I'm like realizing the pieces to add and what makes it flow and grab much better. So I commit it to memory and then I play with it from there, and it's much more fun.
Very, very interesting stuff. Any other questions?
I was just gonna say, of the other people that you've seen, because you've seen a bunch of other ones being right here in the city. Is there any person's performance that you love, like I want to do that? And what was it about it that you loved?
I'll do a plug for my director, Joyful Raven, who's doing a run at the Marsh starting early May, I want to say, the Marsh in Berkeley. But I saw her show over at Potrero Stage called Breed or Bust. And she, it really just resonated with me. She's a really powerful performer, and she tells a story in, I think like a creative and really compelling way. So plug for her, the Marsh Berkeley 6-week run, Saturdays coming up.
So there's one I've seen here that I really enjoyed. I've loved a lot of shows here, but Don Hoyle does one called Border People. And it's just stories of different people who have experiences along the border. And he's a great actor and can really get into character. So it's powerful. I saw a professional play over at the Berkeley Rep, and it was, I'm not going to remember this correctly, Harry something.
Harry Clark.
Harry Clark. And who was the star?
I just looked this up. God, it's not Hugh Dancy, but it's the other one who she married. What's his name?
It's a very famous star, and it's a one-man show that just knocks your socks off. And that was stunning.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah. So it's a really cool format when you see somebody do it professionally.
And I'll just say that a few of these, Dan Hoyle, who you were mentioning, Brian Copeland, Don Reed, number of other people, some people who used to do it more, oh my God, how can I forget his name? Charlie Barron. I mean, now these are people that have performed at the Marsh, and they're professionals. They performed around the country, off Broadway. So that's one of the great things about the Marsh, right? We have the Monday Night Marsh. Sometimes it is for people that are consider themselves professional performers trying out material, and sometimes it's for people that want to become professional or who don't, but who just are dying to learn this craft and want a place to tell it. So that's one of the things that I think is very special about the March. You get to see things in, people at all levels. And honestly, sometimes and this does not apply to you too, but I've seen pieces here on Monday night that weren't necessarily all that skillfully done, but absolutely heartwarming, right? Because someone had this story to tell and they got their friends to come and watch it, so it's just, the not to brag about the march, but yeah, because, you know, the world is full of hype and glitter and glamour, not that I don't like a lot of that, but sometimes just a simple story is the most powerful thing. Anyway, that's my little,
And I wanted to call out, Don Reed was one of the early shows I saw, and I fell in love with him. He's really good. So a lot of, I mean, there's nobody I've seen I've been disappointed by.
all right, can we quote you on that?
The plug, the shameless plug. Thank you guys very much.
Thank
That's
you so
the.
much.
Yes. Without a live audience, I appreciate you all on Zoom, but having live bodies in the theater, it's just, the pandemic showed us just how yucky it was to just stand, to perform into a camera in front of you on a phone. But quickly, Abby and Mark, how can we find out more about your work, social media or carrier pigeon wise? How can we get in touch with you or find out about you?
Yeah, my website is abbyglover.com, ABBEY, Glover like Danny. And if you have Instagram, you can find it there. If you've got other stuff, you can find it there. And we'll both be back here. on the
2 weeks.
22nd.
Yeah, 2 weeks, and I don't have an Instagram account. I don't have a website. I do
LinkedIn.
have a LinkedIn. That's, you called me on that one. And I do have an email address, madams1@gmail.com.
Madam's one.
Madams1.
Wow.
I jumped on that early.
Yeah.
Well, performers, thank you, and audience, thank you.